Welcome to session one of the Leadership Digital Transformation Program. It's being run by Turn It On behalf of Microsoft. This makes up part of what would be a complete vision day, but we're breaking it down into 6 sessions. So in the end, that would be 6 modules across the program between and that will build up to help you understand how you could possibly bring about digital transformation in your school, academy or trust, and how you could use the educational transformation framework from Microsoft in order to achieve that. We'll also be looking at some practical examples of how we could use Office 365 and elements of Office 365 and Microsoft products to help bring about that change. And there will sometimes be tasks which ask you to go away and undertake yourself. They won't be too onerous, but they will help for other sessions or prepare you for future sessions, and then also stimulate discussion in those sessions about what's going on in your school or your academy or within your trust, and we can start to share ideas and get those out there. Session one is about improving communication, and the areas we're going to cover today is we're going to have a look at the educational transformation framework from Microsoft and the approach to that. We'll then have a look at how we can use Teams and parts of Office 365 to think about getting hold of resources, sharing resources, communicating not just within staff, but with governors, with trust board members, and how to really make sure that it's an inclusive process. One of the other benefits you'll get from coming along today is that you will get a code that allows you to become a certified MIE even on the Microsoft Education Center. And there's going to be question and answers throughout. So I'll have various pause points. You can pop those in the chat on the side of the meeting bar in Teams, or you can unmute your mic and just talk to me. I'm more than happy to take questions, and I promise I don't bite. So just a little bit about my background. My name is Martin, as I said. I was once a teacher, and I went right the way through to senior leadership. Spent about 15 years working in mainstream education in primary, middle and secondary phases, and then came to work for such as Turn It On, delivering curriculum services, project management and so forth. So I still work in schools. I still give some time to schools and teach part-time. So there will be questions that you'll raise, and you might be thinking, well, does Martin understand this? Is it going to be cold in the sense that he's just delivering a transformation framework? I promise you I'm not. I very much contextualize this in what schools and trusts and academies require, and I'm more than happy to discuss any aspect. We had previously a session where we set the scene and people decided whether they wanted to come on this journey with us. And you can see there the dates for the future sessions. So we are today on session 1, and the final session will be on the 10th of December. By the time we get to that stage, we'll have covered various elements of the educational transformation framework. We'll have also looked at some parts of Office 365 that will help you to bring about change in your school, and shared how the journey is treating us in each other's schools, and also those ideas that I mentioned. It's really important that people feel that they can talk in this community, and I want it to be open, and I want us to feel like a group. So if something is discussed in confidence here, please let it remain confidence. We will start with probably the biggest game changer that we've had in most recent times in education, and that was thrust upon us completely externally. And you can see a Satya Nadella says there from Microsoft. When COVID came along in March, April, all of a sudden everything that we knew turned on its head. We had to embrace a new world, and very often that was having to take on board huge amounts of change through technology. But that technology also brought opportunities. But I know from working with many schools in all educational phases, often I saw the digital transformation accelerate at a pace I've never witnessed before. And even people that have tried to shy away from embedding technology in their day-to-day practice, either because they didn't feel it was for them or because their school hadn't brought it in, all of a sudden were forced to just be immersed in this and also find ways to be successful, because it was one of the main vehicles to reach pupils or students at home, and they were no longer in front of us in class. And we had to get to them. We needed to deliver some form of learning, and to some greater or lesser success, we all had a go at trying to solve that problem. That still continues, and certainly here in the UK, whether we've got bubbles out because a particular class or a year group have got COVID cases, or whether we're in an area that's moved up to one of the highest tiers and we're going to look at local lockdowns, and potentially on October 22nd, we all need to be ready for this. Potentially, if we ever had a circuit breaker of some description, how would we cope? Would we be ready? And how could the educational transformation in the school, which may have already taken place, be capitalized upon to further still make improvements? And what have we learned so far? So I'm going to pause at that point. I'm just going to ask people on the meeting really just to share their insights into what's happened in their schools, what's been difficult to adjust and change, or where have you found success as well. So I'm just going to throw it open, and feel free to unmute your microphone and just talk, introduce yourself, and share anything that you've got as an experience. Anyone want to share anything at all? If not, I will move on, but I want to give you the opportunity to talk to each other as well. No? Okay, we'll continue for now, but please don't be shy. The education transformation framework really helps in structuring that change. As I said, it was thrust upon us at the point that COVID arrived, and it was an example very much of unplanned change in many cases. We didn't have it on the horizon that we needed to adjust these things in our schools, but we had to in order to keep engaging with parents, keep staff supported outside of school and not seeing each other on a daily basis, and reaching pupils either for education purposes to make sure they had high quality learning, or even for pastoral support. There was a lot of people that just were getting huge benefits from being able to speak with someone or see someone and boost their mental well-being, and that worked for staff too. So with the educational transformation, it's about that, as I said, bringing people together, but finding ways to make it feel natural, make it very non-threatening, but also to make sure that everybody comes with you. And that is, in my experience, one of the biggest challenges, to bring about that change culture and not leave everybody behind. And to use that old analogy, make sure everyone's on the bus and coming with you. Easy. In the planning that we're going to look at through the Leadership Digital Transformation Program and the ETF will help you to think about that within your schools. And one of the tasks that we're going to launch today will be for you to undertake independently within your school and your staff, and then come and share the outcomes at one of the future sessions. So really, it's a question I think we're all asking ourselves is what will the students and the pupils and the teachers need to do to be ready for the future? And trying to think about that, it's very much a rhetorical question, is how can we achieve that? What's it going to look like? What are we going to need to put in place to get there? And what challenges do we know that's immediately going to present? And then there will always be more obstacles in the road. But one of the purposes of forming this group, and then Microsoft have asked us to deliver this project, is so that we can work together as another community across schools, across the country, to try and share good practice and help everyone to improve. And then at the end of this, I'd really like to share what we have achieved and ideas that we've gathered together, and success stories that we've got to celebrate, and then get them out there. And I know Microsoft want to share those too. So if you think you'd be open to this at the very end of sharing success in your schools, it's something we'd like to capture at the end of these 6 sessions in December. The school-wide transformation, it has to be strategic. There's no point just rushing into this, and there's no point just trying to do it on your own. It needs to be a very holistic approach, thinking about all of the different areas in your school and the people you've got in different roles, to get somebody on board from the different aspects that you've got in your school, whether it's physical roles such as admin teams, you have the business manager, you have the curriculum staff, and you might have on-site staff as well that provide things such as lunch services and caretakers and so forth. But they've all got a really valuable take from their own perspective. And if you're going to try to make sure, as you said, that everyone's going to come with you on that journey, we need to take into account, how is this going to affect their role? How is it going to affect their day-to-day life? Are we going to give them something that's going to make their lives in their roles easier? And we're trying not to make things any more difficult. We want this to be a unification, not to split people out further still. The traditional school model, particularly around technology, is that we had the school at the center of that picture, as you can see from the diagram on the right. But very often, information that filled in was coming from multiple different places, and it sometimes involved different systems, whether it's an MIS system or pieces of software that dependent upon. So I think if I was site services, I might keep my asset register in an external piece of software, and I might be the only one that really interfaces with that because I'm the person that wanders around school and pops asset tags and barcodes on things. But does everybody else know what that is? It might seem insignificant until maybe you've lost an item in the school, and that might have some important data on it. So you're thinking, well, how could I unify this and bring it all together? Also, how can we make sure that any data in that is the integrity of that data is maintained, and that we could all get to it if we needed to get to it, but also it's accessible from any place. And also then thinking about, well, where's the quality assurance? How often do we check things? We might put a system in place. We might train somebody to use a piece of software. We might develop the through CPD, but how often do we go back and quality assure what we've got? Is it still fit for purpose? Did it stop being the right thing to do many years ago? And with the digital transformation we're looking at, often the pace of change is so fast because there's a lot of new innovation all the time. I'm not saying you want to introduce and bring in every single idea that we come across, but there are some that really gain traction and can be quite beneficial to the school. And we will be having a look at those through the 6 weeks and thinking about how they could then be transferred into your own establishments and how they might benefit everybody that works within them. The other thing is thinking about, not to make this too confusing, we spoke at the beginning about people that maybe aren't so willing or find it hard to look at a new piece of software or a new platform, or look at the screen of a computer and fathom out where they've got to go, or how they drill down and find the piece of information or the bit that's relevant to their role. So it's about making it intuitive and making those experience positive ones, not that it's an area of frustration where people start tearing their hair out. So alongside all of this, we are going to consider the training and the support that needs to go in so that you have a clear picture of how your school works. You have a clear picture of how everything is connected together, but you also know that the people that within your school have the correct skill sets in order to access this new world, but also deal with the change process that they might go through. So the new model looks a bit different to the one we were just looking at previously. The things like the integrity and the consistency of data will be more unified. They'll be there together, and that when you come to use something, it shouldn't be that you're sat there in front of a screen and it's absolutely bamboozling and you're thinking, what do I click? There's loads of buttons. It's not intuitive how I navigate around this thing. Should be that whatever somebody comes to use is intuitive. The interface makes sense. It's not overly complicated and simplistic in nature. There's also that thinking about, well, in schools we're data rich, and around performance data and making sure students make expected progress and staff meet standards, we're very often highly data literate, and we've got very good systems in place to ensure that that's centralized. And there may be very simple graphs or dashboards or tables that we rely upon to interface with on a daily basis in order to drive up standards further still, and put in improvement plans in school. So in this process here in Leadership in Digital Transformation, we're thinking about how data can be centralized, how we can access it easily. And it's one of the things we're going to look at in the second half of the day, is how we can use parts of Office 365 to do that. We're also thinking about, well, once we've got that data, we don't want to waste hours of time actually getting to it and having to process it and do something with it. So we're going to find ways to forecast, to budget, to get that data out so it's meaningful, but it's quick to access and quick to pull together if we need to rerun something. And that really means that the school and the system and the community at the centre, and then no longer all these things outside, they're all very much linked to it, and they all link to each other as well. So you might have cloud is where a lot of services are, tends to be we're moving away from having things like pieces of software in school or computers in school, and a lot of things are based in websites or cloud platforms. Also, administration of school might be centralized because you've academized, and now some of what used to go on in the school is being handled in the trust, and there's trust central services or procurement services. And that then links very clearly back into the school or academy, but you are very much a whole, and that the academy isn't going to go off and do their own thing because they're very much part of the trust, and that you want to know that they've got the support, and they also could tap into what maybe you've got to offer or things that you've already taken care of from them, even down to just accessing policies that might have been written or suggested procedures that could be adopted. That if you can't get to them easily, you end up getting frustrated and maybe developing your own, which is an absolute waste of time. And then somebody might come along and go, well, do you know what, we thought about this and this is how we want it to be done. And although you've got some very good ideas here, and I can see that you've spent many hours on it, we still wanted you to access the central trust version, which was stored here, more than likely in the cloud. So it's thinking about how people know where information is, and also how they can go on that journey to navigate to it in the shortest possible time. And really, during this process, a re-evaluation of, have we got the right apps and tools for the job, or do we need to bring some new ones in? Do we need to make better use of what we've got, which is maybe what we'll be able to help you with here with the Microsoft products? Or do we need to have a re-evaluation, and have we even got to go out to tender and find a better solution, something that works better than what we've currently got? So one of the things that I want you to just really talk to me about is, what do you think at the moment is an opportunity for you that exists in your educational establishment where you currently work? What opportunities do you think you've got to improve? And really this to be an opportunity for you to say, don't name and shame anyone. I want this to be a positive discussion, but saying, where do you think we've got opportunities to do something better? Where do you think at the moment it doesn't quite work in the way we'd like it to? Or do you know what, people find difficulty with this aspect of the school or the trust or the academy? How can we do things better? And where is there an opportunity to make a change that could really have a positive impact? I'll just let you have a minute or so to think, and then I really would like some people just to share their perspective from where they're working currently. So I'll just give you a minute just to consider that. Okay, that's just over a minute to have a little think about your own individual situations. Is anybody feeling willing to share where they are currently, where they think they may have opportunities to make change for the better or improve in their own school or trust?
I'll be brave if you like. It's Alan Rosen here.
Hello, Alan. Welcome.
My thought is that MISs are more part of the problem at the moment than the solution, and that they don't really help, whichever one it is, they don't really help with your transformed diagram. They're old-fashioned in the way they operate.
Yes. I can let me flick back so we can visualize what I mean. They don't easily integrate into that sort of nirvana that we're aiming for. I suppose some of there are a few which I'm not here to name drop platforms, but some MISs I suppose are entirely cloud based, but they do sit within their own structure, and you often need other applications to get data out of them. There's there are a few third-party products which you would need to have and in order to get meaningful data out and to transfer it into other systems, such as getting it out of MIS and using it to bring into Office 365 or other platforms such as Office 365, you have to have something like a sync tool, which schools or trusts often have to pay for. But I agree with you in what you're saying, that they are a self-contained unit and the data's in them, but actually to get the data out of them and transfer them into other systems in other ways, you very often are stumped, and it can often rely on a lot of manual intervention in transference, unless you put things like that in. Thank you, Alan. Anybody else got anything they want to contribute at this point? Okay, I'll continue on for now, but please don't be shy. Thank you, Alan, for popping that idea in there. And it is hard to get every single system in, and it will be a long-term journey. Most schools that undertake some sort of transformation framework project, you can look at 2 to 5 years quite easily in order to get where you want to be in the end. And then there will obviously be change in technology along the way. So it's one of those things that's constantly evolving and also needs constant reevaluation as to whether you're still heading in the correct direction, or whether something better has happened, or an external factor such as COVID has intervened and we now need to change tact entirely. I think it's encapsulated there by that quote saying that the world is rapidly evolving around us, and sometimes that pace of change accelerates at an unbelievable rate, and then that has what we've been experiencing recently. And then it's just considering, how does my school, my academy or trust get there? We do need some sort of proven framework or structure. With the best will in the world, people in education establishments are busy getting on with the day-to-day of running it and making sure that they are delivering to the higher standards. And what they don't have time to do is write a framework for improvement. And that's what we're going to offer you through the Educational Transformation Framework from Microsoft. It's also something that Microsoft has invested heavily in, so it's grounded in a lot of research and it's used in many different countries. This isn't a UK-based framework. It's used around the world in many different languages. And what we've also got to offer you are lots of real life examples, and we'll give you links to testimonials. We'll also give you links to case studies in this country and in other countries, how this framework's really worked and helped schools, trusts, academies structure their thoughts, prioritize their action plan, and then also give them a vehicle in order to deliver that, however complicated it's going to be. So for those people that were with me on the initial meeting, the Educational Transformation Framework has 4 pillars. First is leadership and policy, then you've got teaching and learning, you've got intelligent environments, and you've got student and school success. Anyone that's had involvement with the ETF previously, Microsoft earlier this year completely revised the Education Transformation Framework, and it's changed one of the pillars entirely and it's updated the others. So even if you've been working with this prior to coming onto this course, you are going to find some changes as we go through this process. So each of the 4 pillars are then broken down into 4 categories. And what we will do periodically is we will visit either one of these pillars, or some of these sessions, such as session 3, is entirely structured around giving you some planning documents and you doing some work about starting to plan your own educational transformation framework within your current situation, and then coming back after session 3, which will be sort of late November time, and talking about, okay, what have I decided is going to be my first project? How am I going to tackle it? How has Turn It On got some ideas to help me with that? And we've got some sessions within these sessions where we start to examine how you could use some of the technology you may already be able to tap into in order to bring about some of that change. And then, as we said way back at the beginning, share the success that's happening in your educational establishment, and then maybe allow somebody else to build upon that within theirs. I mentioned in the session that we had about making you mind that whether you wanted to come and join me on the Leadership Digital Transformation Programme, it's a mouthful to say this afternoon, we would need to undertake using the assessment tool. And the assessment tool really is the first step in getting into you diagnosing where you are, and what it gives you is a set of criteria to go through. So I'm just going to open that open that up. I'm going to jump out of this presentation. I'm quickly going to show you where that tool is. I'll also pop the link for this into our session so you can click on it yourself and you can have a look, but I will pop it on screen in a moment, and I'll make sure that you can see what I'm seeing over here. But that educational transformation framework tool is really the first step to you planning, well, where am I now and where do I want to be? And what do I even need to do to get to where I want to be? And is where I want to be even possible? And those sorts of questions can open a lot of doors at the beginning, and also it can cause you to do a lot of soul searching. But I'd urge you, as someone who's come onto this program, don't try and complete this, and you won't be able to complete this in isolation. You will need support in doing so. So when you get to it, the educational transformation assessment tool landing page looks like this, and you'll need to click on take the assessment. It will give you a description of the educational transformation framework, each of the areas that we are going to work through, and then down here in the bottom right hand corner you press the continue button after you've had a chance to read. All of these links here have got clicks on the end so you can understand a little bit more about each of the 4 pillars and then the areas within each of the 4 pillars. And I would say have a brief read of that before you start, but it isn't actually that integral to you being able to complete this survey. So then it takes you through the questions around each of your 4 pillars, and it gives you different levels. So you're either going to be entry, emerging, advanced, or transformative, and you'll be thinking about, for each of these statements here, under, for instance, student-centered learning as an example, where are we? Where's our current state and where's our target state? And all you need to do is read, apart from the reading, it is just click a box. So you may say, do you know what? We're at an emerging level. That's our current state for student-centered learning. I would imagine most people will be about a 3, but our target is to be in a transformative level, and the description for that is just above. So you click box 4. And you'd work your way through the different self-assessment questions and self-assessment levels until you get to the end where you can get a preview of your report if you want to while you're doing it, or you can download your report at the end. And one of the things I would like you to come back with at session 3 is where you currently are, where you want to get to, and what you've highlighted is what you may need to do in order to be successful in reaching what you're aiming for. Bearing in mind, as I said, this is going to be a 2 to 5 year process possibly. Sometimes there are quick wins, things that can be implemented, but there may be other reasons why you can't get there so quickly. It could be that it's based around a system that to change it would take a long time, and you need to plan how things are going to be transferred in the way of data or information in it and moved across. It could be budgetary, that you just literally can't afford it, and it's going to have to wait a couple of years until the school, the academy, or the trust has the money to bring about that transformation project. But just so long as you understand what you want to do, where you might want to go to, and some idea of how you think you're going to get there, and if there are any barriers, what they are, and what the realistic goal is to overcome them. So that report, we will come back and I'll ask you all to share elements from that report in session 3. So the link for that is in the chat and you can pick it up from there, and then you can work through it in your own time. Has anybody got any questions about that at all and they want to ask before I move on to any other sections? See a few more people have joined us. Welcome. No questions? Okay, I'll swap from sharing that screen back to the presentation. So the session 3 is going to be on the 10th of November. We'd like you, if you can, commit to coming along to as many sessions as possible. One of the sessions will link to the next one, and what we've done previously will build. So it's beneficial if you can come along. But As you know, I'm always recording these, so if you miss it, you can always go to the events page at Turn It On. And if you click on the events page and then you go to the button that says Leadership Digital Transformation Program, where you can also book for future sessions, it gives you a link to the YouTube channel we have on the Turn It On YouTube, which has all of these sessions there. The one that I delivered initially for deciding if you wanted to join this program is there. And after today, this one will go there. So it will gradually build up. So if you physically can't come, then you've got another way to go and watch the session afterwards. If you need any information, you can always give me an email or contact me on Teams, or you can drop an email into the office and it will get forwarded to me. We are going to focus in on the pillar today of leadership and policy, and we're going to look at that collaborative nature. We're going to look at communication, collaboration, centralizing resources, and that is one of the aspects, just to make life easier for everyone, where people can readily get to what they need to do their job, but also can communicate and speak to people when they need to. So there isn't a barrier to getting an answer or letting someone know something important. It is easier to do that, and we're going to have a look at what Office 365 has in place to achieve that. Before we do, one of the things that people often ask me is, how on earth do we get into Office 365 or things that we might use for communication such as Teams? And all you really need an answer is a web browser. And it can work on a Windows desktop, it could be on a tablet, it can be in a browser, it can be on an Apple Mac, it could be on a phone. But as long as you've got a web browser to open up, yes, there are some apps for Office 365, but you open up a tab, you go to office.com, it will take you to the Office 365 landing page where you log in, you pop in your email address or your username from school and your password, and then everything you need to use will open up as a tab in a web browser. The most readily supported web browsers are there in the bottom right hand corner. The new version of Microsoft Edge, so if you've got the old one, which is a solid blue E with a white swoosh around the middle, that's the old version. It doesn't tend to work as well. The new version is built on Chromium and it's really reliable. I like it quite a lot now. So you can get that, either download that, or you could ask your IT administrator to install it on your network. Google Chrome browser works well, and if you are on a Mac, Safari is now mostly supported. There were a few things that didn't work quite so well for a period of time, but Microsoft have now updated that, and most things are out of preview. So there's various ways to get to this, and also for your staff, whether you provide them with a device or whether they use a home device to access School Office 365, there's lots of ways to get in. But on the flip side of that, parents or pupils and students can also easily get in depending on their device at home. I fully appreciate and accept that a screen on a phone is no substitute for a full desktop screen, and you sometimes do need space to see resources or do things. But occasionally it's better than nothing to be able to bring up Office 365 or elements of that on a smaller screen, because at least you can participate or you can get to the answer for something. One of the other questions I often have is, well, is this going to cost us anything? And in order to get Office 365, I think most people on this call, knowing a lot of people that are here who've previously worked with me, you already have Office 365. But for the one or two people that I'm not entirely sure about, you can get free Office 365 for education. It's called A1. There's different levels of licensing. And whether that's for staff and faculty such as school or academy, it's free for A1, and for pupils also it's free for A1. With that, then you get the important parts of Office 365. You get your Outlook for email, as long as the email's been configured. You get the Office apps online. If you are going to upgrade, and some people do need to upgrade so that you can get things like Microsoft Publisher, which only works as a download and install program, that doesn't work online, or if you're somebody who uses Access as a database, I think that's becoming less and less common, you can upgrade to that. One of the big differences is that if you are on the A1 free version, you can only use the online web apps, whereas if you upgrade to A3, you can download and install a version of Office on your computer, as long as you're using a Windows computer or an Apple Mac, and it will then allow you to use the desktop software. And occasionally, depending on whether you're using some of the more advanced features in Word and Excel, it is easier to use that desktop version. Other things that you get included, whether you're using the A1 free version or any of the paid versions, the tools that you might use for getting central access to files for collaboration is OneDrive. So personal files go in OneDrive, shared files go in SharePoint or Teams. But Teams also is the hub of communication. But there's various other apps that we're going to look at as we go through the program and how they might support you in fulfilling elements of the ETF. So most of what you're going to need is there. The differences come down the bottom. I don't think there's many schools that I know of that use Yammer as a communication platform. Most people stick with Teams. If you want to use bookings, that's what the B at the bottom of the screen is for. I've got some large secondaries, FE and HE colleges that are using bookings for things like room bookings. It's a really effective way of managing that. If you know that your staff or your site staff need to have a booking facility to book resources around school or rooms or even book physical assets, bookings is great for that, but you'd need to be on one of the subscription programs. And then really, you might have somebody that's an administrator for your school, and they might use things like Power BI, which is to get graphs and data displayed graphically. But there's going to be very few people that would require the A5. So people often say, what's the cost of this, Martin? Is there something hidden? You're talking about the Education Transformation Framework. That is free. There's no cost to that. You're getting this course for free. But you would benefit from having Office 365 set up and having access. So because you are an education establishment, you're automatically entitled to the A1 licensing, which is free, which gives you quite a lot, to be fair. But if you want the downloaded software, you need to do the upgrades. Most schools would leave pupils and students on A1, and staff tend to either get upgraded to A3 if you need desktop software. But I am getting some schools that are saying, no, do you know what? We're going to work entirely out of the cloud. So it's a consistent experience for everyone in the school, and we haven't got to worry about whether they've got a program installed on their computer. That was Office 365, and gradually that will then get phased over to Microsoft 365 without getting too heavy. Microsoft 365 is Office and a lot of those online elements that we spoke about in the last slide. But what it gives you then in Microsoft 365 is it gives you licenses for Windows 10, and it also gives you ways of managing devices in your school. So Microsoft has a device management platform called Intune, and if you've got Windows laptops or tablets and so forth, you can use Intune to manage those centrally. So no longer do you have to be worrying about, are they on the server, or do I have to go and visit this device individually? You can have them all seen by logging onto one portal in the cloud. And then if you want to change a setting on there, or you want to roll out a piece of software, you can do that over Intune. But that's often one of the reasons why people move from Office 365 over here to Microsoft 365. One of the other benefits of going to Microsoft Office 365 and having A3 is you get Minecraft for Education. And we aren't going to look too heavily at Minecraft for Education in the Leadership Digital Transformation Program, but I am using it with my MIEs and my MIEs, so they're Microsoft Innovative Educator Experts, and they would be normally classroom practitioners. And Microsoft Education Edition is great for bringing various aspects of the curriculum to life and grabbing pupil attention. And again, it keeps it in one place, but it's online so that people can get access to it from different locations. So with Office 365 and what we're going to look at this afternoon in the pillar we're focusing on, it gives you storage for documents, be it SharePoint for collaborative or OneDrive for personal. It gives you communication tools, whether it's Outlook for email, it's tasks. Also, as well as Teams being communication, it can also be storage, because in there you have files areas. You can also use Yammer, but a lot of schools tend to just stick with Teams itself. You've got all of the Office apps online, so you've got Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and OneNote is now, I would say, integral to education. And you've also got all those other apps that we're going to have a look at as we go through the program. So in sessions 4 and 5, and a little bit in session 3, we'll have a look at some of those other apps and how they fit into this bigger picture. But everything more and more would be linked to Office 365. But Office 365 is not just Microsoft. A lot of people that are third party also develop for Office 365 and plug into things like Teams. So you can have a single digital hub and all those other things that you might subscribe to, such as you may use Kahoot in the classroom for questions, or you might use Espresso. They can start to get linked into your Office 365. So no longer do you have things spread around in a disparate manner, that they are centralized. I'm going to focus in for the rest of this session and how you might be able to use Teams to achieve that. And we're going to look at the communication elements of Teams, but we're also going to look at how to use Teams for file management. We're going to look at it from an organizational structural point of view. So some of you that have been with me before, it's slightly different today. But the vision for this is that it becomes one hub for most things in the school, if not in the end, everything in the school. And it makes it a lot easier to keep people consistent in they log into Office 365. Yes, they might use Outlook for email, but they go to Teams for most other things, and they only have to worry about staying in Teams. They can either do that as a tab in their web browser, or they can do it as an app that's installed on their computer. And as well as it being the other hub, it's also the one hub for connecting everything, as I said. So whether on the left you've got the Microsoft products, down the bottom you've got the extended Microsoft apps such as Flipgrid and assignments and OneNote. You've got core functions in Teams at the top where you might use chats for quick messaging and Teams for the bigger posts. You've got the option in the future to replace your telephony in the school. So there's still quite a few people that are thinking about what to do when ADSL, which is the old copper cable system, gets switched off, and how we're going to move forward with a phone system. Well, Teams has the option to build your phone system in, so you can handle internal calls either within the trust or within the school and academy, or you can have it so you get external as well. So there's lots of ways that Teams could lend itself to that. And as you can see on the right hand side, it then builds in third-party applications, whether you're using Wakelet or you use Moodle as a VLE still if you're in a secondary. Those things can be tagged into Teams as well. So you've got that one place where everything is linked together and cemented in, got a basis in Teams. So we're going to look at communication first of all, and we're going to look at how staff can use Teams to communicate more effectively, whether it's in groups, privates, or calendaring events. The focus of this really is to build community, whether it's within a whole school or academy, whether it's within a teaching and learning focus. It might be that you are having pastoral support and you're using teacher to pupil or student. It could also be that mental well-being I mentioned, but it very often is a great thing for strengthening staff teams, because if you've got somebody who's self-isolating at home, for instance, or maybe their class is out because their bubble's got a confirmed case, they don't have to be at home and not able to join in anymore and have the frustration of sending loads of emails back and forwards with files on, or not being able to get an answer from someone. You might be able to send someone a quick question and get them to respond to you. So communication we'll have a look at in a bit. We'll also look at distance learning transformation. So we are going to have a look at how to deliver blended learning with some pupils with you and some pupils at home, or full remote learning, how to get access to those files, and also how to do things like assignments to map progress. The way that you could easily make sense of that is to think of organization of trust and team resources. We are going to look at whole teams and channels, and I will show you a real version in this in a minute. We'll then look at how we can use features in there, such as posting to each other, or how that versus traditional email. We'll look at how we use a files tab, and then we'll think about, well, we've got personal file storage in OneDrive and how we might keep our resources there. The idea being that we transfer with structural examples from maybe being limited within our role. Maybe we support a trust. We could be a governor. We might be in the central trust team and we can't get to the resources in the school. It might be that we're in one school and we're affiliated with another school and we need to get across. Well, we could have this by keeping everything in Office 365 and in Teams. So I think at that point is an apt to move across. But while I swap, has anybody got any questions about that? And I know there's a few people on here that joined me from the MIEEs last year. Have you had any success with elements of this while I swap over and reshare the other screen? Feel free to unmute and talk to each other. Nope. Okay, I'll swap screens a moment. Okay, you will now see a web browser. I'm going to use the web version of Office 365 for you to start to think about how it could link into your educational transformation framework journey. Depending on how frequently you use it and when you had Office 365 set up, you'll either land here, which is the Office 365 landing page, and it has all the apps vertically down the side, They're the same apps you can get to from the app launcher, and it'll have all your frequently used documents there, or documents you want to pin. So the idea is you land here and you can get to everything. We're speaking to you about different sorts of licensing. If as a school you've opted for the higher level of licensing, this is where you can download and install your version of Office on your computer, and it will automatically detect whether you're using a Windows computer or a Mac and then install the appropriate versions of Office. If you stayed with the A1 licensing, you won't be able to do that, but what you will be able to do is use the online versions of the apps here and open them up as tabs in the web browser. I'm going to focus primarily on Teams today, but I have a really quick look at OneNote first, and I'm just going to open it up in a separate tab. So the mindset, first of all, is people traditionally kept their files on the server, and yep, they got them in folders, but they're locked in that server, and you may have a remote connection over the internet to get into your school, but not everyone does. And if you start to keep your files, your personal files in your OneDrive, they're up here in the cloud. They're safe because the school has Office 365 for Education, so it's GDPR compliant, and all of the documents and the files are stored in the EU. Also, as a school, you are able to, if you needed to, get to any files and folders that a member of staff is using, because you would provide the Office 365 account on behalf of the school for them to use while fulfilling a role in the school, whatever that role is. But if you needed to, you can pause that account, and you would make it very clear in their terms of service and also their contractual obligations to the school that if the need arises, you could go in and get information out. It could be also that somebody goes off on long-term sick and you need to pick up resources that they've been using or they've been developing. You've got a new teacher coming in to deliver that class. It could be someone in a central team, and maybe their finance, and actually they're too ill to tell you what the username and password was, and you can't get into their files. Well, it's just easier because whoever goes into Office 365 and as an administrator could take the folders from this area, so you could highlight them, you could copy them across, or you could get certain individual files or folders out and bring them through. Also, for searching of information, if you had things like subject access requests under GDPR, you could easily search the email that's in Outlook, but you could search the files that are here in OneDrive. And if you needed to find something because somebody had made a subject access request, you can do that more efficiently and easily through Office 365 than you could by manually searching through all the files on the server or separately in an MIS system, as Alan raised earlier. You've got a lot of information here and you can find it in one place. So OneDrive, all I really want to highlight to you is it gives you an alternative to having to use a server, and every member of staff, when they get their Office 365 account created, they will have OneDrive here in the cloud. It can also be set up on your computer, so you could open this up as a window on your computer, and then you can access and use files as normal. You don't have to log into the cloud version, but the cloud version is there, and you can either make new folders and files, or you can drag folders and files over and in, and it will upload it if you've got things stored on a USB stick or an external hard drive, or you've got them on the server. You can move them into your OneDrive, and you could be anywhere in the world and you could still get in and work because Office is built in too. So if I wanted to get to a document, I click my Word document, opens up as another tab in the web browser. Here I've got Word and Office here, right here in the browser. So whether it's the benefit that the school can say for pupils, we've provided you with online Office. You don't need to worry about whether you can afford that as a parent or your child's got that on their device at home to access home learning that we've set. It doesn't matter because when they click on it in Teams or in their OneDrive, the online version of Office it's associated with that file will open up and you can carry on merrily editing. You might say instead of that being called document, this is called test. It's called test 1. You can rename things on the fly. It's automatically saving back up to Office 365. When you finish with it, you just close the tab. And then down the bottom here, up comes test 1. There's test 1, and it'll be exactly where I left it last time, and I can carry on editing. So the ease of work and actual flow tends to be far better than having to worry about, have I got the correct piece of software installed? Have I got Office on my computer? Is it going to throw up problems? It's just there in the cloud. So that's to organize personal files, but that's all well and good if you're an individual. But what happens if you want to start to work, as we said, collaboratively, or also communicate together? And this could be within the school, or it could be within schools in a trust. It could be that you're working across primaries and secondaries, and Teams is the better vehicle for that. If you come into Teams itself, and I know I've got a mixture of people here with various levels of experience of using it, so forgive me if I re-explain something you've seen before. You can see here in front of me, I've got lots of different types of teams, but just by the names of them, you'll begin to understand that Teams has multiple purposes across a school. Work with the school, I would see that there was a central staff team that would be relating to the employees of the school. I may see a governors team as well, and that's so that I can work with a governing body, or I could work with trustees. If I'm working in a trust, I could end up with a trust team where the people that are in school that are relevant to work with the trust, or the trust can look back into the school, have a team where all the different departments in the trust can quite happily keep all their resources. And then over here, I've got more teaching and learning focused teams, and these are called class teams, where it might be in a primary situation or a secondary, or it could be an intervention class. That everything is here in one place, and regardless of what I'm doing or where I am, or if I'm in a separate building and a different campus, for instance, I can log into the Teams app and I can see all the teams that I need to connect with, and all the people I need to get to are there in one place. If you need to make teams, it either can be done, picking up on Alan's comment, by putting in a sync tool. The only drawback there is sometimes there are costs associated with that. And what a sync tool does is it will pick up defined fields of data from the MIS system, such as it might be forename and surname to create an account or an email address, and it brings them over into Office 365. So you only ever update the MIS system, but the sync tool means that Teams is always up to date. And if you had a pupil that left during the term, you in your MIS system move them off roll, and when they're moved off roll, you end up with the pupil disappearing out of the team because it automatically is taken care of by the sync tool. If you had a member of staff, maybe they'd gone off on leave, you brought in another member of staff. If you signified that change in the MIS system, maybe you change the registration group or the class name, that sync updates it. So it makes the whole process of having everyone in the correct place and being able to speak with each other and work with each other far easier. And it doesn't mean that there's another administrative burden upon someone in the organisation. And yes, there is a cost to some of those sync tools, but very often they make life a lot easier. So Microsoft has a product called School Data Sync, and School Data Sync is really good for achieving that. And there are lots of other third-party products that do very similar things. And if you've got a project and actually part of your ETF highlights that you need to make the movement of data easier, and it doesn't stay, for instance, as Alan says, in one system, the MIS, and it actually gets to other systems without people having to spend huge amounts of time and effort doing that, it could be one of the things you highlight is actually you need a sync tool to move this data around, and it becomes an automated process rather than it being something that's time intensive. Once you've got these teams, you can flesh them out. So I used some terms earlier, and I was acutely aware on one of the last slides I showed you, I used some Microsoft Teams terms that may not have made sense if you haven't used it before. So these top level here are individual teams. If you go into a team, on the left-hand side, you've got these subdividers. So this would be as if I was working within a school as a member of staff, or maybe I'm on the leadership team, but here you've got what's called an administrative view because I can see all of the channels. The channels are these subdividers, and what you tend to do with staff teams to organize the communication, organize access to files, you have these sub-teams called channels. So the overall team is a staff team. You don't have multiple teams because that gets confusing. People find it hard to navigate. I've sometimes gone to work with trusts where people adopted Microsoft Teams early days, and what they did is instead of having channels, they created a team for admin, a team for business managers and so forth, and people found it really hard to navigate around because on the front here, instead of just having a few to look at, you end up with loads and loads and loads and this huge list to scroll down, and it's very hard to navigate. So the less you have here at top level, the better. And again, this might be part of your ETF planning. Then you have channels down the side. The idea is that every team has a general channel. You can't get rid of that. It needs to be there for the creation of a team. Very often in the context of a staff team, every staff member's in the team channel. And you can see here, for instance, that one of my colleagues had made some feedback, and I had put in here another day about there's a whole staff meeting coming up. And one of the keys we wanted to show you this afternoon was how Office 365 could aid the ease of communication. Well, there's lots of tools in Teams that can support and make communication easier, but there will be a period of readjustment either in the trust or in the school to work out how you use the tools that you've got. So you have in every single team and every single channel a posts tab. And posts are great for asking quick questions. You can see here as a demo, someone said good afternoon, and I might say, hello, how did the meeting go? And if you wish to have a discussion, as this is in the general channel, for the whole staff, instead of sending a whole staff email, you could just put, if it's a short piece of information, such as a notification there's a meeting tonight, don't forget, and here's the document for that meeting, or how did something go whole school? We've introduced a new parents' evening system. How did it go? Get some reflection and quick feedback. Posts is great for that. And if you work as a central trust team and you want to find out how it's gone in each school, you could ask that question easily against multiple different schools and multiple staff teams, because down here you could start a conversation, and when you start a conversation there's an editing tool at the bottom, but here you can use the features that you've got. And I'm just going to post, if I made a comment now, in this staff team for this single school. But what I could do is I could post to other teams in my single school, or if this was me looking out across multiple schools in the trust, I might say, well, yes, I want it to go to the general channel in the staff team there, but you know what? I'd like it to go to the general channel in the trust team as well. And I press update, and what I'm doing here is reducing the workload of having to think about sending multiple emails. I post once and it distributes out across all those teams with all those people involved. So posts is one of those ways that you can change the way that you work in communication terms within individual school or within a trust with multiple schools. The other way that you can use Teams to improve communication is around chat. So I've got somebody who set up a chat the other day, it looks like for quite jovial reasons. It could be for social morale, as that one looks like. It could be for professional reasons here. It can be with an individual that you have a chat. So this works a bit like instant messaging, or it could be with groups of people here. So I've got a demo person and I've got a colleague, and I'm asking them there when we want to catch up, and we can have a discussion. And again, it wants to be quite short questions, but what it allows us is to talk together as a small group without it being public. Whereas here, if I did it as the post section in the class in the staff team, it would be public and everybody in there would see it. But chat gives me the opportunity to have a private discussion, but it still doesn't fully replace email. And this is why you need to think about your communications policy. And that might be one of your goals, to revise your communications policy, because communication improvements within your school or within your trust could really transform the way that people work together and make the flow of information better. It is thinking about, okay, so what goes in a private chat, what goes in a post in a team, and what still goes in an email. And normally an email is more those weighty conversations when you're getting into a few paragraphs. A chat or a post doesn't work. If you are having to direct documents, you can share them directly from OneDrive. You don't need to any longer attach documents to emails. You click on the documents you want, be it one or two, and I might say there, I'm going to send a share link. And what I can do is I could share that document from my personal OneDrive out to other people, and I could send a link to them. They'd get an email about that, and it would appear over here in their shared list. So I can get files moved around more easily by adopting this online environment and keeping my personal documents in OneDrive, or my shared documents, as I'll show you in a moment, in Teams. So you've got Teams for communication. You've also got Teams for file organization, and every single team has a files tab too. And in the staff team, in the general section, this could replace a whole staff shared area on a server. And what you can do with some planning is move all of your folders and files from a shared server drive up here into the cloud. You do need to plan that work in that data migration because, for instance, you can't go as deep with folder structures. But when they are moved over here, the other beauty you've got, just like your personal documents, is wherever you are working, you've got all of the central whole staff files or trust files available to anyone when they need them. And if you want to work on a document, whether it's daily briefing, I click on it, and unlike in my personal OneDrive, Word opens up here inside of Teams, and this will be the same whether I'm a pupil or a student or a member of staff, and I can quite happily work in here. So today is the minutes, changes proposed, and I may then pick that up there. I may then add those in, or other people can also join in here together, so they can collaborate in the one document in real time, and they all appear with different little flags. And they could all be adding their comments in, or they could do that throughout a week, but we're all tapping into the same version. So no longer do you get the old scenario where you had version 1 to 8 of the same document and someone had the unenviable job of merging together. You all keep it in one place. So it makes things efficient because you can access it. It makes collaboration easier because it's in a single point, and that can be accessed from anywhere with an internet connection. But also you don't end up with multiple document versions where people can end up putting comments in one and not seeing someone else's comments in another. So it just brings clarity by having Teams as the one place you go to. So here inside the staff team, I've got the general channel, and things that I've got such as files and posts, they'd be available to everyone because you've added in everyone in the school. I'm just going to discard that one. But if I then was working as a business manager, it might be just me, the head, or the chair of governors here, and I can make separate posts that are entirely private to people and what they're seeing in the general channel. So I might be discussing a budget forecast, or let's review how much of a deficit budget we've got at the moment. And I can also share files. So if that budget was on a spreadsheet, or I'd exported something from another system, the spreadsheet could go there. And it's entirely private. That padlock means it's a private channel. So I can organize my school, or I could organize my trust, so that I've got all of these different channels, which really are sub-teams or roles within my school or within my trust. And they'd all have somewhere to talk together for relevant discussion purposes. They would all have somewhere to keep their files, but it will be private unless you want to put it in the general, which is meant to be fully and wholly open and collaborative. But they've also got somewhere to talk together, but Teams gives them somewhere to ask private messages quickly. But with both of those options, whether it's private chat or posts, you can turn it into video calls, and you can have a spontaneous meeting like we are now, or you could have an audio call. So if you didn't know someone's phone number, but you knew where they were in the directory for your school or trust, you could turn it into an audio call and just catch up with them quickly on the phone if it's easy to talk in person. You don't have to just be restricted to typing. But if you need to get a document to them really quickly here, you can do things like attach from your OneDrive, or you can upload from your local computer. You could also organize meetings for communication here, such as you could set an event in your calendar. So I set one up yesterday for a whole staff meeting, and I can go back in and I can edit that, and I can invite people either by individual email addresses or group email addresses, set it up, and they will get a Teams meeting link, and then they could come and communicate here. And that might be, if I'm working as a trust with multiple schools, I could get people talking to each other across schools, and we could organize meetings. And with the world of COVID, we wouldn't have to worry about going to other people's sites and the risk assessments involved, or visiting other bubbles, and pupils can work across schools as well in the class teams. So when it comes to those teams, we've looked at the staff one almost exclusively so far, but you could get rid of expensive platforms. So there's various subscription-based platforms, and they have various functions in there where governors can talk to each other. Well, you could say here are our meetings, either whole meetings or full governors meetings or subcommittee meetings, or important notices that governors need to read because there's been updates to policies or changes in legislation. All the governor's files could be stored in here, but as the leader of the school or the trust, you could also get to the governance team. You could send them important messages, or you could add to the files or anything else, but you could list the subcommittees down here. So the general tab could be the full governing body, but then all the subcommittees could be listed down the side, and they could be having their own posts and files and chats. But if you've been added to those different channels, you can dip in and out. So the scope of the way that you could organize your organization is quite far reaching, but what you need to do initially is plan it out and not rush in too quickly, because otherwise it can become muddled. And talk to everyone in the school, involve them. We said at the beginning about getting buy-in from absolutely everyone, and some people may feel quite upset or threatened by this if they don't get the appropriate training and support, or they don't get communicated with and they feel left out and it's just done to them. And it's really important that that holistic nature is used if you are going to bring in one of these projects. The final area that I'll show you before we break back to the presentation might be trust teams. So here you can see each of the individual trust teams. You might use the general channel, you may not. You see, you might be whole trust notifications where the leaders of the schools want to see that, and they may be in that general channel. But then there may be other people that are in operations only that just come into the operations channel, and then nobody else would see the operations channel, because as you can see here, the padlock means they're all private. So if you aren't joined to them, you don't see them. If you are joined to them, they're visible to you. You can have it organized a slightly different way. So they could be private, or they can be what's called standard. So you'll notice here, this one hasn't got a padlock next to the senior leadership channel. It would be visible if I was in the staff team for this school, just like the general channel is, except if I clicked on it, it would say I don't have access, and I could request access, which then somebody that owns it could deny, or you could allow someone to come in. And you can manage who's in here just by, if you've got the sync tool and you update the MIS data by your MIS being up to date, or there's ways here to manage teams, and you can make people owners. So in other words, they're administrators of these teams and they can control them, and other people will be guests. So you can manage these teams, but it gives you a structure to improve communication in your school potentially, complement traditional email use, but also make sure that files are available anytime, anywhere to the people that need them for collaborative purposes here in Teams, but also for Office 365 and OneDrive for personal purposes as well. So there's quite a bit of scope, and we wanted to show that to you here for considering your journey and your educational transformation framework plan about what you might use in Office 365 and Teams. I'm just going to pop back over and finish off. Any questions at all before I move into the final bit of the presentation for today? Okay, so what I am going to do, I think I'm going to duck out. I've got my slides in slightly incorrect order here. I'm going to pop down to the bottom for you. And I promised that what we would do also today is get you to be certified MIEs. Well, we can make sure that you've got that. And what I'm going to now do is share a code for something called the Microsoft Education Center. If you've got a Microsoft Education Center account, and I know some people on this call have, you can sign into it now. If you haven't, just search on the internet for Microsoft Education Center and Microsoft. When you get there, you can sign up. And the code that I've got at the top of the screen there will allow you to redeem that, and you will become a certified MIE from just coming along to today's Leadership Digital Transformation Program. And that code allows you to input it, redeem it, and you'll get some qualifications for starting the ETF journey. And also you could pass it to people in your school or your trust if you want them to redeem it, if you want them to come on the same journey, and they would also become certified MIEs from that. Somebody's put a question in. Alan, you've asked a question about, can team have multiple administrators? Yes, you can, and often that is the way. So when we set up teams, we normally advocate having somewhere between 2 to 4 administrators that have ownership of those teams and be able to change the structure in the channels. It allows flexibility for if people are away, but also it stops one single person being badgered. So I would always advocate sharing the administration within those teams. Any other questions for anyone that's still on the call? I know a few people have had to go. They've messaged me to say they've had to drop off. Okay, so as far as we're concerned, next steps. if you want to find out more about the educational transformation framework before we delve into it in more depth on sessions 2 and sessions 3 of the Turn It On Leadership Digital Transformation Program, you can follow Microsoft on social media, and they quite readily post about the educational transformation framework, but you'll also get very good ideas from the UK education team about how Office 365 and things like Teams could help within your trust or within your school. And you could also email and contact Turn It On, and we are readily available on Office at Turn It On. If you need to get to me directly, I am martin.long@turniton. So if you're on the Leadership Digital Transformation Program, I'm happy to answer questions, and I will normally come back to you within a day or so. If you need to ask a question of Microsoft, you can see the Microsoft inquiry address there, and they are very responsive. There's a dedicated team for that, and they will come back to you. I am going to say to you, if you've got the time this afternoon and it's at all possible, please could you complete our evaluation form? We'd really appreciate it. I'll drop that into the chat. It helps us to improve these sessions, but it also helps to improve the offering that we're going to make for future courses that we're going to run. I'll drop that into the chat now. But really, that throws it over to you today. We focused on the communication, the organisation, sharing files, making it easier to collaborate, and begun looking at the ETF. I'll highlight again that you need to make sure that from today's session, you spend some time before we get to the middle of November and session 3, completing your own self-assessment, because we will ask you to share your findings from those in session 3. But really, it's throwing it over to you at this point. I'll stop the recording, but have you got any questions and anything you want to ask? So this won't be recorded if you do want to ask.